Is that us? Are we live?
Yeah, we're live. We're live.
Oh,
we're fully live.
Hi there, everyone.
And we've got 3 listeners already this morning. Wow. Thank you for joining us. Sorry for being late. I'm really delighted to be with an international sports star, property investor, property developer.
Delighted to be with you, Brendan, as well.
Thank you. So, for those of you just listening via Facebook Live, I'm with Richard Thorpe. Richard is one of the key founders of RDT Invest. Now, Richard, to tell myself and the listeners as well a little bit about your background. You've come from a rugby professional background. You've played for the likes of London Irish, was one of the teams. I think you had over 100 caps with the London Irish. You played for Canada as well. I think one of the key games you played was in front of 70,000 fans at the Millennium Stadium, and I'm sure you can remember that as well. Yeah. So, and it's not just all about rugby as well, so we will go into property, hear Richard's thoughts about where property will be going in terms of funding, particularly looking at aspects including raising additional funding, so the key there is additional. So, rather than me rattle on, your background's in rugby, how did you fall into property from rugby then?
Right, so I started playing rugby when I left school. So I joined a Premiership rugby team called London Irish. And you start off in their academy, you do a couple of years in the academy, and then you graduate into the first team. So I was fortunate enough to get my first real professional contract at the age of 21. And that put me in a position to be able to buy my first house. So that was in 2006, and I don't know if anyone can remember 2006, but back then you could borrow 100% from the bank. You borrow 100% of your purchase price from the bank. No wonder 2008 happened, right? You could also self-certify what your earnings were. I was obviously completely honest about that, obviously, but it allowed me to get onto the ladder at a relatively young age. So that was kind of me accidentally falling into property, and I started renting the property out, saw the whole passive income piece coming in, and I just thought, this is a great model. Why not go and build a little portfolio whilst I'm playing rugby, because that should hopefully set me up by the time I come to retire, because as we know, professional sportsmen have a shelf life. Sure. You can't really get much past your mid-30s. So that was my real reason.
Particularly in something like rugby, which is
yeah, I mean, rugby's becoming more and more physical every year. Guys are just getting bigger, stronger, fitter, so the hits are getting more intense. When I was at Leicester Tigers, they equated it to a 30-mile-an-hour car crash, a big collision with a rugby field, and you're putting yourself into sort of 10, 12, 15 of those a game. Yeah, your body isn't going to last forever, basically. So that was my reason behind getting into property back then.
Now, to the listeners out there, if there's a comment, you'd like to add a comment, feel free. So, as I say, Richard comes from a sporting background, and as I say, I have another interview later today with another sports star. It's interesting how sports stars seem to be attracted to property. Is there a particular reason, or do you think it's coincidence?
No, property is a very good investment. You can't borrow money from the bank to go and buy stocks and shares. You can't borrow money from the bank to go and buy gold. You can borrow money to go and buy property. It's a really smart investment, and most sportsmen are aware of that. I would say, particularly in rugby or the lower earning professional sports as opposed to football. Sure. Footballers just earn too much money, so they don't need to be financially astute, really. I mean, that's probably why 3 out of Carl will tell you this. Carl Hutchins. You're interviewing Carl later on, right? Yeah. Great guy. Carl will probably tell you about a stat. 3 out of 5 ex-Premier League footballers are bankrupt within 5 years of retirement.
Yeah, he says something like that,
yeah. And that's an official stat from Ex-Pro, a charity that he's done some work with, and that's terrifying. Most rugby players don't earn enough money to kind of think, right, I'm just going to be able to retire and maintain my spending for the rest of their life.
Even for people who are playing at the top, like the Premier League?
Yeah, I mean, the top earners will retire as wealthy people, but if you want to maintain your lifestyle, you're going to need alternative income. So that's exactly it. That's the attraction of property.
Sure. And we didn't really allude, but Richard played for Canada in the recent Rugby World Cup. So, looking at RDT, so you founded that with your brother, Darryl?
That's right.
And the specialism of RDT is how to create the additional funding. So if you're a developer and you're thinking, look, there's some great opportunities, if you're looking to avoid the pain of not matching those opportunities, then have a look at RDT. Where's RDT right now in place, and looking at short, medium and long-term goals as well?
Okay, so RDT Invest, our company, we founded it, my brother and I, back in 2014. We had both been in property for a long time. Daryl's quite a bit older than me.
10 years.
10 years older than me, yeah. He doesn't like anyone knowing that, but he is.
Okay.
So don't tell anyone. Daryl's been involved in property for over 15 years. I've been involved in property for over 10. Primarily as landlords and light refurb specialists. We've done a couple of heavy refurbs prior to coming together. Our business model now, Daryl's got a background in finance. So he founded a family consumer finance company back in 1998, sold it to an American private equity firm in 2009, and he's got a lot of financial acumen. So it made sense really that we go and create a business around Daryl's expertise around finance, and let's see what I can bring to the table as an professional rugby player. May sound like an odd mix, but we're trying to blend the two so that we're sort of equally bringing value to our business, and there's very much a rugby flavour about RDT Invest and what we do. We're going to be doing a lot of work with Premiership rugby players as we move over through into 2017, and that's really going to be part of our identity. But to really tell you who we are, what we do, so RDT Invest, we have two primary functions. We are property developers, so we buy sites, we develop them out, we are just your standard property developer. And then we also manage a property investment fund. Now that fund we do deploy into our own developments, but we primarily deploy it into other developers' deals as either equity, so joint venture finance, or as mezzanine finance, and that's something I think we'll go into a little bit of detail a bit later on about exactly what mezzanine finance is and how developers can utilise that to scale themselves and take on multiple sites.
Sure. And your focus in terms of investing, yourself and your brother, is based in the southeast, or is it across the UK as a whole?
So for the developments ourselves, we're both London based, so we need to be able to access our site. So typically we do our own developments in Greater London. In terms of where we invest into, we do London and Greater London, excluding Zones 1 and 2. Zones 1 and 2, in my opinion, is carrying a lot of risk at the moment, so I don't like prime central London. But we will invest in London and Greater London, and then major UK towns and cities.
Sure. And the situation certainly has changed this year significantly with landlords, developers, partly because of government taxation, maybe because of Brexit. Where do you think the next couple of years will be for landlords and developers? What do you think the situation with funding is? As a general, do you think it's harder or easier to get funding? My co-host for the Central London Property Network, Luke Hamill, keeps going on to me. It's a change in market. He says it's become much more professional. He doesn't really see the landlord being in the same position as they were 6 months ago, a year ago. He sees it completely different. Sees it more being professional.
Yes.
He keeps using the word professional.
A good word to be using for modern day property investing, really. I mean, look, the story hasn't changed. Legislation changes. As a landlord, as a developer, you need to be aware of what is changing in central government, because legislation does change. To go and be a landlord, I mean, they call it the accidental landlord, don't they? You don't actually need to go under any formal training or anything. Anyone, really, as long as you've got the money,
Sure, yeah.
can go and become a landlord. But there are so many things that you need to consider. I mean, for example, if you don't have a smoke alarm on every floor in your property, and your house burns down, and your tenant dies, this is to use a very crude example, you could wind up in a lot of trouble because you haven't adhered to the legislation. So, I mean, the story doesn't change. You need to know what you're doing. You need to know what the government want you to do, and to bring it bang up to date. There's a lot going on at the moment.
Yeah, no, I do take that on board. Where do you find your information? Is it through leading organisations, or?
Well, I work with. I have a role with the National Landlords Association. I'm the South West London host. So if anyone's a landlord in South West London, I'm your rep. So do get in touch. And yeah, so with that, it's part of my job to keep bang up to date with legislation. So that helps me. But really, reading local press, getting onto the government websites, being a member of an organisation such as the NLA, because they give regular updates and give you the information that you need to know to be a competent landlord. But really, it's just being smart. It's being abreast and keeping up to date with what's going on.
How do you manage your time? Because you're both. We haven't explained in this video. You're still involved in rugby. You're a coach for one. Well, they're top of the league right now.
Yeah. So Chinna RFC, who play in National 2 South. We're currently top of the league. 10 out of 10 wins until last week. Now we're 10 out of 11, unfortunately. But no, things are going very well on that side, and that's part-time, so that's semi-professional now. So I stepped back from full-time pro rugby at the end of last season, and I'm now in a semi-pro team. So I'm head coach down at Chinna, and I play as well, which is great fun. Yeah. So that's 2 evenings a week, and training, and then a game on a Saturday. So it's quite manageable.
It's still important for you to keep your diary, and I'm sure you have a VA or a PA, but also how do you manage, even though you say it's quite manageable, how do you create both the property side and also you still have to have a fairly good fitness level as well?
Yeah, so I mean that all comes down to sort of diary management and just being very disciplined with your time. From 3 o'clock onwards on a Tuesday and a Thursday, I basically clock off and I'm on rugby time. So I'll take myself over to Oxford, where Chinna play, where Chinna train and play, and that's now rugby time. And I can cram everything I need to in those hours on a Tuesday and a Thursday. The rest of my time is RDT Invest. So Darryl and I, we have 2 executive assistants that manage our diaries for us, and if you know the difference between a PA and an EA, an executive assistant will take on more challenging work. So they get a real deep understanding of our business, and can give us. They help us on our appraisals. They help us on all sorts of sourcing. I mean, they're brilliant. Two girls from Emma EMMA is the name of their company.
Okay.
And they're remotely based as well in the UK, but they're very good. Our business has really just come on leaps and bounds since taking those 2 on.
So we've looked at some of your team members. Is there software which helps your journey as well as a property investor? Software, do you use something like Xero or Off Online? Yes,
we use Xero. Funnily enough, I was at the Property Developers Academy, the PDA, speaking on the weekend, and I was asked a similar question, and it comes down to one of the key things that a developer needs to get a handle on is their appraisal, your financial appraisal, your full development appraisal, and that largely it's just done on Excel. It's just done on spreadsheets, but there's no formatted, centralised way of doing it. So when we work with developers, every time we get sent over an appraisal, it's always different. It's structured in a slightly different way, and you've got to spend the first sort of couple of minutes. It doesn't take that long, but you've got to work out how they've structured it and how they've arrived at all their numbers and everything else. So I think there's probably a market for a specialised software system as it pertains to appraising appraisals. Because no, we do most of our work off Excel as it comes to the numbers. But yeah, we use Xero. Receipt Bank as well. I don't know if you've come across Receipt Bank. I mean, brilliant. You literally, when you pay for something on your company card and you get your receipt, typically you would just chuck it in a folder, right? And you'd spend a day, a month sorting it all out. Now you pull it out, it's an app, you take a photo of it, push submit, done. And you throw the receipt off. Brilliant. It's a Receipt Bank. Highly recommend that, actually.
Have you looked at CRM systems as well?
We're in the process. Setting things like that up take a lot of time. We don't have a lot of time at the moment. It's one of those things that if we were to invest the time, we're going to have more time further down the line once it's set up. It's kind of the whole chicken and egg thing. But at the moment, for the last sort of 3 months, we've had a lot on our table that we're trying to get through. So we haven't really had the time to set that up.
Just to let the listeners know, this is a fairly short interview. It could easily be an hour or longer. But the purpose of this is just give you a flavour of what Richard would be talking about and going into a lot more detail. I won't be butting into the conversation. And that's coming up on Wednesday the 23rd of November, very close to where we're located right now. So we're located in the beautiful Shard. I'm not sure which floor we're on, but...
we're on the 24th.
24th floor.
Shard is our office space.
And literally just a short distance in that direction, so in a southerly direction, literally 1 minute's walk is the London Bridge Hotel. So that's where my event coming up next week is. It's at the London Bridge Hotel next Wednesday evening. My co-host is going to look at trends, what he's noticed this year. Luke's been investing for the last 14 plus years. I'm delighted Richard's going to be presenting on raising additional funding. So the key thing is additional, because what should the listeners know about connecting with you, contacting you, opportunities? What are the opportunities in funding with RDT?
Right. I mean, if I just give you some content rather than a sales pitch on RDT Invest, because I mean we work with an exclusive number of developers. We would rather have less developers that are doing a lot more than take on a lot of investors. So typically we don't work with that many people. So if I just give you some content.
Sure. Yeah.
So the typical developer or the typical amateur developer, or that person just moving out of being an amateur and into being a professional, they will typically use their own money. Or money that they've raised from friends and family, or maybe they are able to raise it from a high net worth individual. But that will be equity. So that's the equity that you're bringing into a development. So let's take a development. You've got your site, whatever it is. Let's, for example, just say it's land and you're going to build a house. You will, more than likely, if you're a smart developer, you'll go to the bank. Or one of the senior debt providers, a senior debt institution, so banks, financial institution houses, and you will raise as much from the bank as you can, because typically you're going to be able to raise up to sort of 70%, maybe a little bit more, maybe 75% of the purchase price from the bank, and then you only need 25% of your own equity. So that's where most amateur and new professional developers will operate. And that's fine. It's a great way to get your teeth into it. Most developers love the building side of it. They don't like the finance side of it. The finance side just stresses most developers out. We totally get that, you know. It stresses me out. Luckily I've got Daryl. No, I'm actually learning to enjoy it quite a bit, funnily enough. But that's what your typical developer will do. What the professional developers do is they will raise additional funds over and beyond their own funds, what they can raise from friends and family, and what they can raise from high net worth individuals. So that's kind of where RDT Invest come in. And we come in with something called mezzanine finance. People have probably heard the term before. Most people probably know what it means. For the benefit of those that don't know what it means, mezzanine, it's like a mezzanine floor within a building. If you take your capital structure, so the money that's required for a site, at the top is going to be your senior debt. That's going to be the money you've raised from the bank. It's going to be 75% of the total purchase price cost, up to, typically. At the bottom of it, you're going to have your own funds, your own equity, however you've raised it. Sat in the middle can be mezzanine. You would bring that in if you don't have enough equity, or you're trying to scale yourself up, or you're already fully deployed into other developments and you want to take on multiple sites and schemes, you can go to a mezzanine finance provider and raise additional funds. That's typically, mezzanine will typically be at a fixed interest rate. It's more expensive than senior debt, but you're taking on more risk, or the mezzanine lender is taking on more risk, so it's going to be more expensive. But the way to look at it is it will blend out with the senior debt. I'm conscious that I might be confusing people. Is that making sense to you?
No, it does, because I've heard prerogatives.
I usually draw a little diagram which makes it a bit easier to explain. So I guess this has kind of come along to Brendan's meeting and I'll be able to do it with the diagram. But ultimately, we will come in with the additional finance at either a mezzanine level or indeed an equity level as that joint venture partner.
Sure. So do you have a sweet spot as such in terms of investing, whether equity or mezzanine?
Well, in terms of the amount that we would invest, we do. I'm usually reluctant to put that across, but we typically don't get out of bed for anything under 100,000. We don't tend to lend more, or we don't lend more than $500,000 into one development as our money into the deal.
Sure.
So 100,000 to 500,000 is our level, and our sweet spot is in the middle of 250,000.
So just to let the listeners know, so we've talked about next week. You're going to go into a lot more detail. What will I'm sure you're going to be bringing in the rugby analogy as well, and talking about how professionals...
How we're going to tackle this property problem.
Sure, yeah. We're looking at how you're bringing professionalism
that.
from rugby into property.
Yeah.
But what else will you be sharing with...
Well, okay, so I've talked about mezzanine finance, I've talked about equity finance. There are other ways of raising additional capital. You've obviously got your own money. You've got equity funds. You can go out and raise a bond. That's actually getting more and more popular now. People are actually going through the process of setting up a bond, whereby they can now go out and raise money, drop it into a bond, which facilitates and streamlines the whole money raising side. You just pay fixed interest for the people that have invested into it. Now you've got a fund to go and deploy. That's an interesting one. You've got joint venture partners. You've got forward funding. Have you ever come across forward funding?
No.
You will have done. Ever heard of purchasing a property off plan?
Sure, yeah.
So a developer building a big block of flats, they'll sell a handful of the units off plan. They're forward funding their next development. They'll sell at a discount, so it's a good idea for an investor or a purchaser. They'll sell at a discount, but they're now forward funding their next development. They've got a site that isn't even built yet, and they've been able to liquidate part of it, give themselves that cash to go and get the next one going. That's how big scale developers operate. It's all about volume, taking on multiple deals, scaling up. So forward funding is an interesting one, which I'll go into a little bit more detail next week as well.
So, as I say, it's next Wednesday evening. It's, underneath the video I'll be putting a description of how to book for the event. It's a small room. It's for that particular meet. Richard will definitely be presenting for me at some point next year. Not in the Millennium Stadium, not yet anyway. Maybe.
Quite cool, wouldn't it? Yeah, we'll try that one. With 30 people in the Millennium Stadium, that'd be a laugh.
So not the Millennium Stadium, but as I say, London Bridge, really easy to get to. What other things do you want me to add for the video and for the listeners right now? We haven't really said how to connect and contact with yourself. So
the best way to connect with me is on social media. I'm quite busy on social media. My Facebook's Richard J.A. Thorpe. My Twitter is Richard J.A. Thorpe, and my Instagram, I think, is Richard J.A. Thorpe. I'll give you a Mars bar if you can work out what the J and the A stand for. But that's the easiest way. We also have an RDT Invest page, so that's just RDT Invest. That's on Facebook and Twitter. There's some content that we upload onto those pages, and then I've got an Instagram account and a Facebook, whatever you call it, blue tick page, whatever it is.
Okay.
One of those as well. I think if you just type in Richard Thorpe, that comes up. That'd be the best way to get in touch. And there are buttons that can link through to our website, rdtinvest.co.uk, to some more information on there and ways of getting in touch directly with us.
So I really thank you for listening this morning. If there's particular property persons you want me to interview, I've got an interview lined up with Martin Skinner. Martin's a very well-known developer. The date of that interview has not been confirmed yet, so maybe before or after Christmas. So I just want to say huge thanks for spending time with me this morning, and
No
a
problem.
huge thanks to you spending time as well. So
Try the whole
thanks,
thumbs up thing again.
thanks for the moment.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.